Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Friday, February the 17th, 2023. And we continue to look at that passage from last Sunday, the Gospel reading, Matthew 8, 1 through 17, the three healing stories, the leper, the slave of the Roman centurion, and of course also Peter's mother-in-law. And I focused on Sunday and even this week, not so much on the healings themselves, but on how it was and why that Jesus healed. Philip Yancey tells a story that he was teaching once, and with his students, they noticed a very striking pattern in Jesus's ministry in the Gospels. The more unsavory the characters, the more at ease they seem to feel around Jesus. And so we see that even in this gospel, but also the Samaritan outcast, the militant officer of Herod, the tax collector, the woman who had 7 demons, and just on and on and on and on. The interesting thing that Yancey points out is that Jesus got a very chilly response from the more respectable types. Pious Pharisees found him uncouth and worldly. A rich young ruler, if you remember that story, walked away shaking his head. He didn't want to give up and part with his wealth. Even the open-minded Nicodemus in John chapter 3 only sought a meeting with Jesus under the cover of darkness. And so Yancey pointed out to his students what a strange pattern this was, because the church of our day seems to attract mostly the respectable types who closely resemble the people who were most suspicious of Jesus when he was on this earth. And so he asked the question, what's happened to reverse the pattern of Jesus's day? Why don't sinners like being around us? And so he told the story of somebody in ministry who had shared this with him. Somebody was working in the rough section of Chicago. A prostitute came to him in wretched straits, homeless, her health failing, unable to buy food for her 2-year-old daughter. Her eyes were awash with tears. She confessed that she'd been selling herself to support her drug habit. The friend could barely bear the hearing the sordid details of her story. And at last he asked her if she ever thought of going to a church for help. And he said, "I'll never forget the look of poor astonishment or pure astonishment that crossed her face. 'Church,' she cried, 'why would I ever go there? They just make me feel worse than I already do.'" Somehow, again, we've created a community of respectability when that's not the type of people that Jesus responded to. Jesus was always open to and even sought out the outsiders, the outcasts, the outsiders, and people who are so often overlooked. The leper, again, who was a spiritual and physical outcast and outsider. The Roman centurion, an ethnic outsider, the furthest. Not only was he a Gentile, a non-Jew, he was a commander in the army. It was his job to keep the people oppressed and subjugated under the rule of Rome. The leper, of course, was an outcast because of his disease. Peter's mother-in-law was a gender outsider because, again, women were second-class citizens. But the interesting thing is that in the midst of our reading, there's a couple of verses 11 and 12, where Jesus says, "I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And so alongside with this very unprecedented and scandalous welcome of outsiders, Jesus gives a very sober warning to those who consider themselves to be on the inside, the religious people of that day. Because he says to his followers, many of those that you think are outsiders from the east and the west will come inside to share the feast of my kingdom. Many who think they are insiders will be on the outside. They will be the outsiders. And so this passage shows us how Jesus brought the most inclusive welcome to outsiders the world has ever seen, crossed over every spiritual, physical, ethnic, and gender wall in his time. He welcomed, he touched, he healed, commended, and included those who were considered outsiders outcasts and second-class citizens. And he set an example for us to follow. Because when it comes right down to it, if it wasn't for Jesus, we'd all still be on the outside. And because of Jesus, anyone can come in. Alrighty, hope you have a great day. We have one more day of devotions, one more thing. Talk a little bit about healing and curing from a different perspective. A story, once again, from Tony Campolo that I'll share tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye.